You are all set. You are recording now.
Okay,
You're good?
I think so.
All right, awesome. Do you want the side so you can see everybody or you're good?
I'm gonna bring up my slide. Let me share my screen.
Share right there. You know how to do this.
Well, I'm more familiar with Google. I don't use, or with Zoom. I don't use
gotcha.
Google Presents much.
There you go. Awesome. Okay.
Yep.
All right. Beth is on her way.
Okay.
Sorry.
Can everyone hear me?
Oh, that's right. That's right. Have a good one tonight. Thank you.
Nothing to you there. I know, I'm sorry. Am I it?
I can hear you.
Thanks, Ken.
And my binder Bruce. With all my stuff in. I'm such a geek.
Okay, can everybody see me and hear me? Looks like it's 1:01 and I think we've got 9 people on. We've got one in the room here at the Lewis office, and we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to share my screen, and when I do that, I may not be able to see all your faces. So I'm going to ask you if you could just let me know if you see my screen when I share it. Bear with me, I got to get it open now. Okay, can everybody see my screen? Somebody could unmute yourself and speak and let me know.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes,
very
I can see it.
I can see it now.
okay. So you can see the screen, you can hear me. I think we're good to go. If you have a copy of the exclusive right to sell listing agreement and you want to pull it out so you can look at it as we're going through this, it might be easier. I do have it on my slides, but it might be easier to follow or take notes if you actually had a listing agreement in front of you. You should have just changed to where it now shows exclusive right to sell listing agreement, section number 1, brokerage organization. Everybody see that? I'm not hearing anybody.
Yes.
Okay. Brokerage organization. The brokerage organization, by definition, is the firm. Now, it used to say up until July, it said brokerage or broker, and you would put the company name there. Well, actually, it's brokerage organization. So when we modified the listing agreement, we put brokerage organization, and that's where you put the name Coldwell Banker Premier. And then we're going to refer to them throughout the rest of the document as the listing broker. But it's actually the brokerage organization, Coldwell Banker Premier. That's what goes on that first line.
We don't have to put the office where you.
The question in the room is, do we have to put the office you're affiliated with? You can, but it's not necessary. It's one company. You want to put like Milford office, you could, but I typically would not. I just put Coldwell Banker Premier. And you guys on the screen, you just stop me if you have a question, because I can't see you on my computer right now, but I can hear you if you unmute yourself and speak and want to ask a question. So in section number 2, we've got the seller's name and mailing address. And as we're going through the listing agreement, I know some of you on this call have done a lot of listings, so you're familiar with this. And this will be more of a review or recap. But I'll also go over the changes in the form back in July when it was updated. But seller's name, you got to make sure you've got all the appropriate sellers. Sometimes it'll be a husband and wife. You'll have both. For instance, Plummer, Bruce, Edward, and Cynthia Ann. Husband / H/W, that stands for husband - wife. Perhaps it's a partners, 2 partners. It could be an LLC. It could be a corporation. It could be some other type of entity. If it is an LLC, the person that will sign this document that has the authority to bind the LLC is referred to as the authorized member. If it's a corporation, the person who's authorized will be dictated by the corporate bylaws or by sometimes they'll have a special meeting and they'll appoint someone or give them the authority to encumbrance the entity with a mortgage or a sales agreement or something like that. We have a question in the room.
If you have a revocable trust,
Mhm.
are you going to just list out the whole trust?
If you have a trust would typically have the name, for instance, Bruce E. Trust of the irrevocable trust or the revocable trust of Bruce Edward Plummer, and it'll have a date, have the date the trust was set up. And then the person signing it, the trust, will be the seller. The person signing the document will be the trustee. So you want to make sure that you properly identify who actually owns it and has the authority to sell it. And then if it's an artificial entity, who has the authority to bind or sign on behalf of that entity and what their title is.
But when you're putting seller's name, would you put the trust?
If it was owned by a trust, I would put the trust. And the trust has a title.
Title.
Yeah, it would be the irrevocable trust of Bruce Edward Plummer, dated 12/18/24 or something like that. And it'll have a title like that, and that'll be on the trust documents.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Now, just want to make sure, because I can't see your faces online. Is everybody hearing me okay and seeing okay?
Yes.
Okay, very good. So, property description, tax parcel. In Sussex County, you're going to have a number. For instance, it'll say 334-1-101.00. What do those numbers stand for? If you're not familiar with it, in Sussex County, you have a district. That would be like your district 334. Then you have a hyphen, and you'll have a map. The district is the general district, and in that district, you'll have multiple maps. And on each map, you'll have parcels. So if the number was 334, that would be the district, dash 1.00, that would be the map number in that district. And then dash 101.00, that would be the parcel number. Sometimes there will be another set of numbers after that. For instance, it might say unit 1123. If it's got another set of numbers after the district, map, and parcel, what that means is it's a condominium or a co-op or some other form of ownership like that, where in the condominium, the ground is owned by the condo association, and each person has a unit number. So that's how you can tell from the tax ID number if it's a condominium or not. Condominium is very confusing to a lot of people. They look at it or consider it a structure. A condominium is a form of ownership. It's not a type of structure. For instance, townhouses can be condominiums, or they could be in fee simple. High rises are typically condominiums, but you may not realize it. We've actually got out at Nassau Grove, just over the bridge there at 5 Points off Route 1. We've got a community of single family homes, and those single family homes are condos. And it's condo ownership, even though they're single family detached homes. So that's how you can tell by looking at that tax parcel number if it's a condominium or not. Now, if you don't have a tax parcel number, you got a problem. You can't sell a property. You can't actually record it and transfer ownership if you don't have a tax ID number, because the county doesn't consider it a sellable piece of property, or a piece of property that conforms with the planning and zoning and et cetera. So sometimes what will happen, you'll have somebody that's selling a part of a tax parcel. For instance, and I'm hoping everybody's hearing okay. It's odd sitting here speaking to a computer without seeing any faces.
Who is seeing me?
But when you sometimes, let's say a farmer has a 400-acre farm, and so we've got a district, a map, and a parcel, and that parcel is a 400-acre piece of land with buildings on it. And let's say he wants to sell an acre off. Well, what he'll need to do is get that acre surveyed, showing the entire parcel and the piece he's carving out. And he'll need to take it over to planning and zoning and he'll need to get it approved, and they'll give it a new ID number. What they'll typically do, if it was parcel, say 101.00, they might now identify this as 101.01. And if another piece gets chopped off, 101.02. And that's when you see that kind of numbering, you know they've probably been subdivided. Now, the trick is, if you don't have it identified yet, somebody says, I'm going to sell this acre off of my farm, and I'm going to go get it subdivided, but I'm not done that yet. I want to get it on the market, but I don't actually have it subdivided yet. What you'll do, you'll list it as a portion of parcel, tax parcel 334, map 1.00, parcel 1.00. And then you're going to have to describe it. Because you're selling an acre, the public won't know, are you selling an acre to the left side, the right side, in the back, the front? Is it 200 feet wide? Is it 50 feet wide? So you're going to need to describe it so that a person will know where that acre is that you're selling. And you'll need to say, are you actually selling an acre? Are you selling like 208 by 208 being approximately an acre plus or minus? You'll need to be specific. Ideally, what you'll want to do in that scenario is you'll put per the attached exhibit, and you'll actually you'll draw it out or get the tax map, blow it up, and you'll pencil it in red there and highlight it and identify so that a person can look at that drawing and know exactly where this piece is situated that you're going to subdivide and sell. And of course, if you're doing a sale where you've got to sell a piece of land that's not yet been approved by the county, you're going to have to make your sales agreement contingent upon subdivision approval from all proper authorities. You don't run into that too often, but if you should, somebody wants to subdivide, sell part of their land off, they haven't got it approved yet, that's how you would handle it. You got to have a tax ID number otherwise, or you can't transfer the property. Now, then it says being situated in Sussex County, Kent County. By the way, Kent County has a different type of numbering system. They have a number system for their parcels as well, but it's not district map parcel like Sussex County's. It's a little bit different numbering system. I know, Ken, you're on the call. You'd be familiar with their system. It's a little bit different system, but they have their own. It says Delaware and further identified as. Now, here's where I want to spend a little bit of time, especially for some of the newer agents on the call. What most agents are going to put here is the street address. And you should do that. That's the most common way of identifying the property, the street address. For instance, here in, let's say our Rehoboth office is, now I forget the number of the street address. Let's look at Lewis. Lewis is 800 Kings Highway. 800 Kings Highway, Lewis, Delaware. So you would put the street address, but the street address is not a legal description. What you'd want to do, if you're in a subdivision, you'll probably have a lot number. You may have a block number. You may have a section number. You may have a phase number. For instance, in Overbrook Shores, outside between Lewis and Milton, it might be phase 2, section B, lot 3. Where I live in Mill Pond Acres in Lewis, Rehoboth 100. It is block L, lot 28. That's a legal description. That's what you'll find on your deed. That's recorded in the courthouse, that plot of that community. So if you are in a subdivision and you can get it, which is easy to get, you can get it right off the county's website from the tax records. I would put the lot and block number. Now, here's how, if I were listing my home for sale, how I would describe it, where it says further identified as. I would say further identified as improved lot 28, block L, Pond Acres, Lewis and Rehoboth 100, Sussex County, Delaware. Then I would say being improved by a 4-bedroom, 2.5 bath, frame dwelling with attached garage. that's probably not all going to fit on that line and a half. So you may not get all that in there, but I'd say probably improved lot 28, block L, Mill Pond Acres, being improved by a 4-bedroom, 2.5 bath frame dwelling known as 31436 Point Drive, Lewis. Something like that. So I've got my tax parcel. I've got my lot and block if I got one. I've put the number of bedrooms and baths. This is important in my mind, even though most agents don't list it. I think it's important because sellers oftentimes will say, I'm selling a 4-bedroom home. Well, put it in here that you're selling a 4-bedroom home, because when we sell it as a 4-bedroom home, and they do the septic inspection, they find out the permit is for a 3-bedroom home. Now the seller has misrepresented, not me. I've only passed on what the seller told me that they had and what the seller represented. And the buyer, quite frankly, may not be obligated to proceed because they're not getting what they bargained for. It happens a lot where people add rooms onto their homes. They finish off bonus rooms. They do things like that, and they'll call it an extra bedroom. You can't just do that without getting approval. If you want to take a bonus room, for instance, over top my garage, I had a unfinished bonus room. Now, when I had my home built, I actually drywalled it and everything. I didn't put any carpet in, but they actually called it a bedroom. But if it had been unfinished altogether, I would have had a 3-bedroom with a unfinished room over the garage. So then I go in, like a lot of people, and I drywall it and carpet and all and make it a bedroom. Well, there's 2 things I have to be concerned about. Number one, I can't have a 4-bedroom home if my septic system's approved for 3 bedrooms. So before I can add another bedroom, I've got to check my permit, and I've got to contact DENREC and see if my system is designed to accommodate if it will allow a 4th bedroom. Now, if I'm not on a private septic system, I don't have to worry about that if I'm on central sewer. But if I'm on a private septic, I've got to deal with DENREC to make sure that I can call that a bedroom. Number 2, whether I'm on private septic or not, I got to be concerned about the county or the city to make sure that they'll allow me to call it a bedroom. Bedrooms per Sussex County Code do not need to have a closet. A lot of people have the opinion that you have to have a closet in a room for it to be a bedroom. Not according to the last time I checked with Sussex County, you did not need to have one for their building code. You did need to have a method of escape other than the doorway that you enter. For instance, a window. Or if you're in the basement and you're finishing off the basement, basements nowadays have those escape stairways that you can get out. You've got to have some method of escape. The other thing that the county says, if you want to call it livable space, it has to have, and I think I'm quoting this correctly, last time I checked with the county, the ceiling height has to be at least 7 feet in order to qualify as livable space. And it has to meet a minimum square footage. It's not much. It's, like 9 by 9 or 7 by 7 or something small. But it has to have, in that square footage footprint, it has to have, I believe, half or so of the room has to have at least 7 feet roof or ceiling clearance. So if you've got these knee walls that come in, you can't just assume that the county's going to say you can call that livable space. And what you need to do is you need to go to the county. If you're not in the city, you will go to the county. If you're in the city, you probably have to notify both. You go to the county and you get a permit to build or to finish that area. And actually, they'll give you a permit, and when you're done, they'll check it and they'll give you a certificate of completion. Does not require an architect and all that kind of stuff. It's a fairly easy process, but you can't just make a room livable space and call it a bedroom and think that nobody cares, because DENREC cares if it's on septic and the county or cities care. Okay. So I always ask the seller, how many bedrooms you got? And they say 4. I say, okay, we're going to say we're selling a 4-bedroom home, right? We'll put it right in here. If you've sold any homes over the course of your career, I can guarantee you've sold homes where the seller may have thought they had 4 bedrooms and they only had 3 bedrooms and a den or something like that. Or maybe only 3 bedrooms, period. The other room wasn't livable space. Any questions on that description?
So for the means of escape, it needs to have a window or
Well, it has to have a window or some kind, what they had told me, typically a window, or in basements that nowadays, if you want to get a finished permit for your basement, you have to have these escape stairways. They look like a window type thing that you go out and then you climb up the steps and then you step out onto the surface. That's my understanding.
okay.
That's what the county told me from their building department. Okay. Now that's probably 2 or 3 years ago, so it could have changed, but I'm not aware of any changes.
Okay.
What I'm suggesting is sellers sometimes think they have something or say they have something and they don't. And sooner or later, somebody's going to find out. And I'd rather the seller says it's 4 bedrooms, put right here that you're selling 4 bedrooms. Now, number 4, inclusions and exclusions. I highlighted here, and I didn't highlight all the important things. I just highlighted a few things so that I don't skip over them. You need to read this document. If you're not familiar with it, you should read it word for word at least 1 time a year, because it contains a lot of information and a lot of fine print. Now, fixtures, according to our listing agreement, fixtures are included in the sale. A fixture is anything that's attached to the property or made a part of it. And it gives some examples. It says, including but not limited to existing shutters, awnings, wall-to-wall carpeting, radiator covers, cabinets, shelves. The thing I want to point out is landscaping. A lot of sellers don't even think about this. So when I'm going through this listing agreement with a seller, I'm treating you guys as if you're a seller now. I'm going through the listing agreement, doing my listing presentation, and I'm going through the agreement, getting ready to have you sign it as a seller. I point out that all fixtures are included, including landscaping. I know that if my wife and I sold our home, there are certain select landscaping or flowers and shrubbery that we would remove. I've got some daylilies and I've got some irises. The irises came from my neighbor when I was growing up as a boy, and the daylilies came from my wife's grandmother in Virginia. And we would not sell our house before we would let them leave. Take those, keep that landscaping or those flowers. We would tell them to hit the road. So those are going with us. And because of that, if there's going to be something excluded, like the landscaping, I would go under additional or special terms, or I might go down a little bit further under excluded items. We'll go over that in a second. I'd say certain select daylilies and irises will be removed by seller prior to settlement. Something like that to make it clear that they were not included. Otherwise, this listing agreement says they're included. So does the sales agreement. Uses the same language. You'll see it says, should the sellers, and by the way, before I leave fixtures, if you're out showing a house or you're looking at a home to list it and you see, for instance, corner cabinets, check them. A lot of time corner cabinets are just a piece of furniture that's stuck in the corner. Sometimes they're actually built into the corner. If they were built in, they'd be a fixture, but otherwise, if it's just a piece of furniture, it's personal property. And sometimes it's hard to tell. Mirrors, if a mirror is just hanging there, it's personal property. But if it's screwed into the wall and attached to the wall, it's a fixture. So you want to make sure your seller knows what the difference is between fixtures and personal property, so they're clear on what they want to leave and include in the sale. Yes, question in the room.
Sometimes I've seen the pot racks, the gourmet pot racks.
Yeah.
And then I think I've seen a situation where people assume it's being transferred and then it's not, and then there's huge terrible holes in the wall.
Yeah, so the pot racks is the question in the room if you didn't hear. And that's a good example. If it's actually got screws going up into the ceiling, that's a fixture. Now the pots and pans that maybe hang from it, they would be personal property in my opinion. So you may want to be clear on that if they're going to be included or excluded.
I've seen that.
Yeah, but if it's screwed into the wall, it would be a
Do
fixture.
it, okay.
Yeah. So then you'll see it says, should the seller, this is in the highlighted section, should the seller's disclosure of real property condition report differ from the below list of included items, the below list shall supersede. However, the agreement of sale will be the final list of what is included or excluded. You're going to see, and let me go to the next page. Everybody should see a new page now that's got that selection of included items or excluded items. You're going to see these boxes appear 3 times. It's going to be on the seller's disclosure. It's here in the listing agreement. And the same thing, a mirror image, is going to be on the sales agreement. Suppose the 3 aren't exactly the same. One says a washer is included and one says it's not. Which one's right? Well, there's a pecking order, if you would, an order of which supersedes what. The seller's disclosure is first. It's superseded by the listing agreement, which is superseded by the sales agreement. The sales agreement is the final agreement. It supersedes all others.
Hey, Bruce,
Yes.
sorry to interrupt. The slide's
Nope,
not.
please do, so that I know you have a question.
Yep, the slide's not advancing, I don't think.
All right. Are you not seeing the boxes?
Mm-mm. No, we're seeing a page that says understand. Well, I am. I don't know if anybody else is.
Oh, all you see is the main
It's
page.
same for me.
Same for me.
All right. Well, let's try something different.
Are you, do you have it in view show mode, Bruce? Or do you have,
Yeah, I think so.
doesn't look like it.
All right. Well, let's try something
Do
different.
from, just say from current slide. Up top to the left. Keep going left. There you go. See where it says from current slide? Try that.
Yeah. Are you seeing the check boxes now?
Yes, but it's not expanded. You know, your screen's not expanded. That might be why it's not advancing.
Huh.
Huh, that's weird. It didn't change.
All right. Are you seeing the box?
I see
now?
the check boxes.
Okay.
We got them.
Okay. Sorry, folks, for the technical difficulties. I'm still working on learning Google Meet. So in the sales agreement supersedes everything. I'll give you just an easy way to remember. Suppose we offered a house for sale with a washer and dryer at $250,000. Well, the seller agrees to take $245,000, but at $245,000, they're not leaving the washer and dryer. See, the sales agreement supersedes everything. That's the final agreement. And you want to be careful when you're preparing an offer. I'll probably cover this when we talk about the sales agreement again. Make sure that you go down this list and check everything with your buyer too, if you're working with a buyer. Because I've had agents, I might list, and if you're working as a seller's agent, working, as a listing agent, make sure you check it too in the sales agreement. I've gotten a listing before where a seller said, this stays, this doesn't stay. I've had an offer come in from a buyer's agent and they checked that something was staying that my seller never offered. And I called them and I said, oh, you checked here that the washer stays or the dryer stays. That wasn't on the listing agreement or the disclosure. We weren't, and we didn't offer that. Yeah, I know you didn't. I just checked it. They said, I just checked it, thought maybe you wouldn't see it and you'd miss it. And then you'd owe us a washing machine. There are agents that will do that type of stuff. So make sure you check this line by line, especially when you get to a sales agreement, because that's the final agreement that supersedes everything else. So you're going to go down these boxes. You're going to check yes or no. If you don't check no, if you don't check yes, you leave both boxes blank. It's considered that it's no. But I typically check yes and no so that people don't wonder if I just missed a line. And it's fairly self-explanatory. Everybody's familiar with these boxes. Down near underneath the boxes, you'll see it says additional inclusions not previously checked. Now, Dennis is on the call. Ken's on the call. You guys been selling for a while. What are some examples of some inclusions that might be included that are not in the check boxes?
Tiffany lamps.
A what now?
Tiffany lamps.
Tiffany
Or
lamps.
light.
Okay. Tiffany lamps or lights. Okay.
Lawnmower.
A lawnmower. You were in my last class, weren't you? Sometimes what will happen, I've had a couple times where I've sold a property where they've got a nice big yard and they've got a riding mower and they're moving in with family or they're moving into a condo and they don't need a mower anymore. Well, they could stick the mower out on the street and sell it, to the public, but they'll just include it in the sale. Sale includes the riding lawnmower. Can you think of any other examples? Yep.
Pool table?
Pool table. Pool tables are heavy and hard to move. Sometimes they'll say, I'm just going to leave the pool table. So you would write that in there. If the seller's going to leave it, they put it right on the listing group because otherwise that's personal property. Yes.
Okay, if you were selling it as furnished and you're gonna do a furniture addendum,
Okay.
would you still reference in this section your furniture addendum or?
Now, the question is, suppose you're going to sell it furnished, and we do that a lot at the beach because they're rental properties. And if you're going to sell it furnished, I would probably, you could put a note here under additional inclusions. You could put see attached furniture addendum, or you could go to where it has the addendums listed and you could put a check other there and put furniture addendum. But we have a furniture addendum. And what you'll want to do is you'll want to go through probably and on that furniture addendum, it's got like bedroom number 1, bedroom number 2. In bedroom number 1, you might put double bed, 2 nightstands, chair, picture, or wall hanging, something like that. You don't have to, in my opinion, you don't have to go through, for instance, the kitchen and count the number of forks and spoons. I did that once when I was very young in my 20s and new in the business down on Pollocktown Road. But after I did it once, everybody thought that was overkill and a little bit stupid. So I would go room by room and I would list the major items, the things that your buyer really cares about, or in this case, if the seller's selling, the things that the seller, wants to make sure that are included in the sale. Double bed, 2 nightstands, lamp, that type of chair, that type of thing. Now, a lot of people, when they're talking about furniture, they'll say, oh, the house is sold furnished as shown. What does that mean? I can't pick up this document and tell what's included, so I would use a furniture addendum. Let me ask you another question. And this will get a 50-50 opinion in the meeting today. How many of you think a TV is furniture? So if I said the home sold furnished, do you think that means the TV stays? I've got 1 no. Do I have any yeses?
Yes.
Yeah, I've got a yes. And typically I'll get some no's and some yeses. I don't know. The way I would answer that, if you were to press me on it, I'd say you don't buy TVs at furniture stores. You buy TVs at appliance stores or electronic stores. So they're not furniture. But the general public perceives it as being furniture. So that's why you want to itemize the major items. In the living room, I'd put sofa, love seat, 2 chairs, recliner, TV, and I would list them. As I say, you don't have to list every little knick-knack and things like that, because the buyer probably won't care about that. In the kitchen, I typically would say all pots, pans, silverware, cooking appliances and utensils. I would do something like that to be all inclusive, to include everything, so that it would be a reasonable person would understand what was included. I wouldn't say 1 tea kettle, 1 12-inch roasting pan. I'd say all pots and pans. You could take pictures. You could say as per attached photographs or something like that. What happens a lot of times if you're selling a furnished home at the beach, there'll be certain things that the seller wants to remove. And you want to be clear what's not being included. And one of the things that comes up frequently would be knickknacks and personal items. Also pictures or wall coverings. a picture is personal property. If I said the home's being sold furnished, does that mean I'm leaving the pictures on the wall? You can't be that vague. You've got to make it so it's clear. So if I were doing the furniture addendum in the living room, I'd say, sofa, love seat, 2 chairs, TV, 2 pictures, or I might, be even more specific than that. We do have an addendum for that. Question in the room.
Is it overkill to have like what's exclusions list?
Is it overkill? The question is to have an exclusions list. Additional exclusions is next. Now, if it's not a fixture, nowhere here does it say it's included. But this is really designed if there's a fixture and you want to remove it or exclude it, you would list that there. You could have an exclusions list and say to exclude, but I think when you start doing that, they think everything else is included. So I would probably put an included list and say not to include furnished, not to include knickknacks, wall hangings, and personal property, something like that. I would list the included items, and assuming the other were not fixtures, they were excluded.
Okay.
Now, when it says additional exclusions, if you've got a fixture like my landscaping, that's where I could list that it's being removed. And in the real estate class, I know some of you on the meeting are newer, and in the real estate class, they always talk about the dining room chandeliers excluded. Well, so you put in here the dining room chandeliers excluded. What does that mean? What am I going to see when I come for the walkthrough? Am I going to see a replacement? Am I going to see bare wires sticking out? Are the wires going to have wire nuts on them pushed up into a box with a cover over it? What am I going to see? So here you might say dining room, for instance, dining room chandelier will be removed by seller prior to settlement. Wires will have wire nuts and be capped over top of the outlet box or power box. Something to that effect. And listen, this is a listing agreement, but anything you can put in here and anything you can do to help the buyer's agents, because you don't know how good an agent this buyer's agent is going to be. If we can give them a list to work from, it might make our job a lot easier. You can't just rely on the other agent in the transaction to know what they're doing, because some don't. Okay. Now, I'm going to advance to my next screen, section 5, but I'm concerned that maybe it didn't advance on your screen at home. Dennis, do you see section 5, rental lease?
No, I do not.
Okay. All right. I'm going to bring it back up. We'll do it a little bit differently.
Got it now.
Oh, you do have it now.
Just popped up.
Okay. Do you still have section 5 now?
Yes, I do.
Okay. When you're selling a property that has a tenant in it or has a rental agreement, you've got an A and a B here in section 5. Section A is talking about, is there a tenant? Do you have, for instance, a year-round tenant living in the house that you're selling? You can still sell the house. The tenant will go with the property, but you can sell the house and the buyer just assumes the tenant, starts collecting the rent. So it says in A, it says it is subject to a tenant or rental agreement, yes or no. It says seller will assign existing leases. They'll transfer the security deposit over at settlement. That's because when the tenant moves out, the new buyer will be the owner at that time and will have to return it. And it says any other prepaid items and rent to buyer at final settlement. And what happens if you settle the middle of the month? Let's say there's a year-round tenant in the house. They paid their rent $2,000 on November 1st, and we settle November 15th. Then the seller will give half a month's rent to the buyer at settlement. They'll prorate it. It says in yellow here, in the event the property is subject to any rental property management agreement, which contains language indicating that such agreement runs with the property and is binding on any buyer, seller shall provide a copy of such agreement to any prospective buyer, and such agreement should become binding on buyer after closing. Our agreement says that. if we have a year-round rental, and we have a tenant in there and we're authorized to collect the rent and manage the property, it says it runs with the property. And if they sell it, the landlord/seller has to notify the buyer of that when they sell it. So, it's making a reference here in an agreement that would apply in our case. B is talking about a contractual relationship, not a tenant occupying the home, but things like solar panel leases, fuel tanks buried underground, that type of thing. So here you're going to check yes or no. Are there any third-party rental/lease agreements? Fuel tanks, solar panels, water conditioners. I'll give you an example. On a solar panel, a lot of these things are very expensive when you see people with solar panels up on their roof. And what a lot of people do is they'll lease them, and they'll lease them for 20 or 30 years. And so I sold a home out at Deerwood, and it had solar panels, and it was Tesla was the company that owned the solar panels and had the lease. So when we listed the property, we said any sale will be conditioned upon the buyer assuming the lease with Tesla and Tesla's agreement to allow it to be assigned to them. And we put that in the sales agreement as well. If we could not assign that lease, if we couldn't get the buyer approved with Tesla to take over that remainder of that lease and have it assigned to them, then we weren't going to sell the house, because otherwise it would have cost a fortune to pay off the solar panels. So you've got to be careful with things like that. The other one that you see a lot, this applies with most solar panels are leased, not bought. But also it applies if you've got a buried fuel tank, like LPG, bottled gas. You can't get Baker or these guys to come out and bury a 250 gallon or 500 gallon propane tank without you signing an agreement that you will buy all your gas from them for 5 years, 10 years, or some agreement. And it says if you sell the property, this is binding on the new buyer. The new buyer has to continue to use Baker Petroleum, for instance. That's an example. That's who I use. And anybody buying my house would have to continue to use that, or would have to somehow buy that lease out, or would have to work out an agreement with Baker, because that contract runs with the property. Question in the room.
Okay, this is going back to section A.
Uh-huh.
Let's say you have a home and it has summer rentals.
Summer rental. Mhm.
Okay,
Let's say we're selling a house on Lewis Beach today, and it's already booked next July.
correct.
So we would check yes, that it does have a lease
Okay.
agreement.
Okay,
And then what we'll do when we draft an agreement of sale, we'll check yes in the agreement of sale. And the buyer's probably going to want to get a copy of that lease. So the buyer knows when they have to be out, how much they're getting paid. That's a condition of the sale. They're buying it, assuming or being responsible for that lease. So the buyer's probably going to want to know what that is. It also says, I know we're doing a listing agreement now, but in the sales agreement, it says the seller will not offer it for any additional weeks. Well, maybe the buyer wants it as a rental property and wants to keep offering it. So when we talk about the sales agreement, we'll talk about that. You would want to address that. Okay. But A is if you've got a tenant in now or coming, you've got a reservation, or B would be a third-party contractual agreement. All right. Now some of the rest of these go pretty quick. Listing price number 6, that's the price. It's the only price we can quote without our client's permission. So if they list it for, the listing price of the property is dollars blank, unless modified.
Should be
I think,
unless, I think.
yeah, I think I'm missing a U there, unless modified in writing by the seller. It's the only price we can quote. I always, when I'm going through this document with the seller, I go over number 7, I say possession. Now remember, you have to give possession the day of settlement. If we settle November 30th, that means you will be out November 30th prior to settlement. They will give you money. You will give them a deed and the keys. And they say, oh, well, what if I move out and the sale falls through? That's real estate. They say, well, I've got to take my money to buy another house and I need a month or a couple of days to move out. This says possession will be given at settlement. If they need some other arrangement, they would have to put that in here and put it in a sales agreement. I will tell you it's not common, and I will tell you it will affect the sale if they want to, they'll say, well, I need 30 days to move out. Well, you're going to have to put that in here. You're going to have to sell it that way, market it that way. You're going to have to put it in a sales agreement. It will affect the sales ability. And then it's going to have to be addressed in the agreement of sale. Are they going to sign a occupancy agreement or a lease? Are they going to pay rent? Who's responsible for appliances, utilities, taxes? It's just a whole can of worms. Can be done, but it's requires management involvement because it's a can of worms. All right. So number 8, expiration. That's the date the listing expires. And most agents are going to put a year there. Now, if the seller says, I only want to list for 6 months, okay, I can live with that. I'll put 6 months. But what I always tell the seller is you're not committing yourself to a year. What this is, it says it expires in a year. If I put a year in there, that means if nothing happens, if it doesn't sell, you don't extend it, nothing happens, it dies in and of itself in a year. But you can cancel it before that per section 9. And section 9 says either party may cancel this agreement upon blank days notice after blank days from the effective date. So what most agents will try to do is they'll get the expiration for a year. I'd be agreeable as a listing agent to anything 6 months or more, or maybe even 4 months or more. But if a seller wants less than that, they're probably not giving you a reasonable amount of time to sell their property. They want you to spend your money, your time, and they're not even giving you a chance to sell it. I would have some hesitation about that. Mm-hmm. Then number 9, they can cancel it. And normally what you put there, either party may cancel this agreement upon 30 days notice, written notice, after 120 days. Or maybe 30 days after 90. That's what I typically use, 30 after 90 or 30 after 120. So you're either committing to 120 or 150 days. Got 1 year drop dead, but you can cancel it with 30 days notice after 90 days or 120 days. Now, some agents, Coldwell Banker does have, let me turn my phone off. Coldwell Banker does have a seller services guarantee where we're guaranteed to do certain things and to keep our client happy and do the things that we promise. And if we can't make them happy, they can fire us with a day's notice. It's a good document. And I know some of our agents, I know Skip, one of our top listing agents, he will put in there 1 day's notice after 1 day. He's not worried about people canceling him or terminating the agreement. Folks, if you do your job well, people aren't going to want to go anywhere. They only want to leave when you don't do your job. But that's what I typically put. 1 year max, drop dead, 30 days notice after 90 or 120. That's the norm. Number 10, compensation. Here's our disclaimer that's in all of our new documents. Seller acknowledges that there are no standard compensation rates, and compensation in this agreement is fully negotiable, not set by law, any board or association of realtors, any multiple listing service, or in any manner other than negotiated between the broker and the seller. And it says there can be some other compensation models and all that. Now, section 10, paragraph A, this is where we want to talk about our commission, our compensation. Seller agrees to pay listing broker compensation of blank, percent of gross selling price, selling amount, or flat amount. So for instance, you could put $2,500. You can put a flat fee. If you're selling a $10,000 mobile home, you're probably going to put $2,500 because 6% or 10% or 2% it's not enough money to make it worth your while. So there's a minimum commission. Normally here, what you're going to put is, now everybody on this call is from Coldwell Banker Premier, so don't have to worry about price fixing or anything. Normally what you're going to put here on 10A is 2.5 or 3%. That's how much you want for the listing side. It does not include the selling office's side or the selling agent side. We'll talk about that in a minute. This is for the listing side. You're going to put 2.5 or 3%. That's what I charge you to market your house and sell it for you. And then it says plus blank for services rendered. This plus blank, a lot of companies nowadays charge an administrative fee. You could put an admin fee there. you'd want to check with your broker, but typically they range between, say, $250 to $500 would be, I think, what you'll normally see. I think $495 is pretty prevalent nowadays. Our company policy is in our other surrounding regions, they do charge an admin fee. In Delaware, they don't. You don't have to by company policy, but that's where it would go. That takes care of you, the listing agent. Then we go to the next paragraph. Seller acknowledges that a buyer may choose to be unrepresented. Now, if the buyer is going to have representation, the buyer is going to have to enter into a written agreement with the buyer's agent, and that agreement will dictate compensation, and that's what the buyer will owe the buyer's agent. And if the buyer's agent wants the seller to pay it on their behalf, they'll put it in the agreement of sale. But suppose you're at an open house, you're the listing agent, somebody walks in, you give them a CIS, they start asking questions. You don't have to give them a CIS for them to go through an open house. But they go through an open house, they start asking questions, you give them a CIS, you ask them about representation, you give them a representation agreement. They say, I don't want representation, I'll represent myself. I want to be a customer. Now, they wouldn't use those words because they don't understand that term, but they want to be an unrepresented buyer to represent themselves. You just represent the seller. If you choose to work with that buyer and that buyer elects to make an offer on your listing, you or somebody's going to have to draw that up for them. You're not going to be their agent. You're not giving them advice. I mean, I guess you could tell them, go to their attorney and draw it up and bring it to you. But your seller wants it sold. So you're probably going to do some kind of task, some extra additional work, because that's what your seller wants, your client, to get it sold. And this would be where the compensation for that additional work would be. Maybe it's another agent in your firm. Maybe you've got the listing and another agent in the firm has the buyer, and the buyer will not sign a representation agreement. They want to be a customer. What's the other agent in the firm going to get paid? This amount right here. So here I'd usually put 2.5% or 3% as well. So if we have an in-house sale and we're not a due agent, we only represent the seller, the buyer's unrepresented, you're going to pay A1 and A2. You're going to pay the listing agent 2.5 and the other agent 2.5, the one that's working with the unrepresented buyer, for a total of 5, which is the way it always used to be anyhow, or 3 and 3 for a total of 6, like it used to be. So see what I'm saying there? 10A is what you charge for listing side. 10A, second paragraph, would be if you've got a buyer who has not signed a representation agreement and is a customer only. Whoever they're working with is going to have to be paid, going to want to be paid. That's where you would put that amount. Question in the room.
So if they are, unrepresented and they come into you, let's say your open house, and they want to write a contract, and you as a listing agent, you write the contract, would you then be picking up both sides?
Well, the question is, if you have an open house, and let's say it's your listing, and you're seeing open house, and a buyer walks in, and for somebody to go through an open house, you don't need to give them a CIS. But when they start asking substantive questions, then you need to give them a CIS. So you give them the CIS, and at that time, you would explain to them that one of their options, that the CIS says they're presumed to be a client, right? So if they don't want representation, they have to rebut the CIS. If they're satisfied with the presumption of being a client, that you're representing them, then they're going to have to sign a buyer agency agreement. And that'll dictate what you'll get paid for that side of the transaction. If they refuse to sign a buyer agency agreement then, and you're working with them as a customer only, you have both sides of the transaction, but the seller's a client, the buyer's a customer, you do not work for them. What you get paid for the work that you do on that selling side would be the second paragraph.
I see.
So you'd get the total A first paragraph and A second paragraph.
Okay, thank you.
Now, it could be, to answer the question, it could be there's 2 agents in the firm. Let's say you've got the listing and another agent in the firm's got the buyer sitting your open house for you. and they come through, but they don't want to be represented, but they want to make an offer. What are you going to do? Well, this has a mechanism where that agent can get paid to assist, not to represent, but to, and this is a fine line. We are not keen on having unrepresented buyers. And if you're familiar with Zillow, they have, Zillow has these agreements now that some agents and some firms are using where it treats them as customers. And it's unrepresented, and it's just really can be very confusing and difficult. But if it happens, you may want to talk to your manager, but this is the mechanism for payment. Now, if you're at the open house and they walk in and they ask questions and you give them the CIS, you say, it's presumed I'm going to be your agent. You can rebut that if you want. They say, no, I'm okay with that. Well, then if I'm going to represent you, I need a written agreement. Here it is. And then that'll dictate what you'll get for the selling side.
Okay.
In that case, only 10A first paragraph would apply. There would be no 10A second paragraph. It wouldn't apply in that case. It's probably not the easiest thing to explain, but hopefully I
No,
explained
that's
it
good.
okay.
No, and I've been asking.
Yeah.
We've been talking about this for a long time. So
Yeah.
that's good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
First paragraph is what the listing agent gets. Second paragraph would be what any other agent would get if they're working with the buyer as a customer, not a client.
Thank you.
And what if the seller doesn't want to pay
If the seller, what if they don't want to pay?
for that second section?
If the seller does not want to work with unrepresented buyers, I would think you'd put 0 there, and you might want to even put in special terms that the seller refuses to work with unrepresented buyers.
Okay.
They're probably not against working with unrepresented buyers. They're just maybe opposed to paying them. I don't know that they're really opposed to paying them. All they want to do is sell their house. We're the ones that have a problem with it because we don't know how to answer the questions and what we can do for them and what we can't do for them.
Or you put a flat fee in there too.
You could put a flat fee.
Right.
I mean, I've heard some people say, oh, we'll put a couple $100 in there or something, because it's only those ministerial tasks don't involve the exercise of judgment. It's still work. You know, I've worked for buyers before. A buyer hires me as a buyer's agent, and they've got a FSBO that they want to buy, and they say, hey, we'll pay you, but we want to buy this FSBO, and the FSBO doesn't want to pay anything. Well, I end up doing twice the work. So I usually want more money. And that's why that's in there, the first and the second paragraph. Some agents have told me they're not going to work with unrepresented buyers. I think that's fine, provided your seller agrees to that. I think I would not do that without telling my seller that was my position and getting their agreement in writing to that. I don't think we're seeing a lot of unrepresented buyers. There was a lot of question over whether buyers, now that they have to sign a written agreement to see a house, whether they would sign a buyer agency agreement or not, or whether they would balk at it. But quite frankly, throughout the state, most buyers are signing the agreement without too much difficulty. Not all, but most. Now, I advance to the next paragraph, which is 10B, buyer broker compensation. Can anybody online tell me if your screen advanced?
Mine didn't.
All right, give it a second here. Usually on these PowerPoints, it advances when I advance the screen, but today it's not doing it.
You have to have it in presentation mode.
All right. I'm going to try something different.
I'm at 10 now.
Do you see B now, buyer broker compensation?
I do.
Okay. All right. So this is where we would say, okay, here's what the seller wants to know what the buyer's agent's getting paid. Well, it says seller doesn't have to talk about that right now. Seller doesn't have to offer to pay the buyer's agent anything. Most sellers are going to be delighted. They're used to paying 5 or 6%. And we go to them, they say, what's your commission? We say 2.5%, 3%. They say, oh, really? That's great. Well, be aware that you don't have to pay a buyer's agent's fee any longer. However, the buyer is going to have to enter into an agreement, and they're going to agree, because buyer's agents aren't going to work for free. They're going to agree to pay their buyer's agent. That's a separate agreement. We, the seller and listing agent, don't have anything to do with that. But it's very possible that they'll reach an agreement for services, fee to be paid and services rendered. And they may want you, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, to pay it on their behalf. If they do, it'll be in their offer. And this is where I would show them section 29 in the sales agreement. Here's where they'll put it. They'll put it right here, where this is where they would ask you to pay for their agent. But we don't know what that amount is. It may be anywhere from 2 to 3%. It could be more or less, but we don't know until they ask us. You're not obligated to anything at this point. But I will caution you, I would be prepared to pay a reasonable buyer's agent's fee, because if you're not wanting to do that, you shrink the pool of potential buyers, and I'm not sure that's in your best interest. So I would recommend you be open-minded to a 2.5%, 3% commission, and be willing to pay it. But we'll decide that if and when they ask for it.
So it'd be field,
Yes, in the agreement of sale, it's section 29, I believe.
right?
And I would show the seller, here's where it'll be. When we bring you an offer, if they want you to pay it, here's what they'll ask for it. But there's no need for you to commit to anything at this point, because we don't even know what they're going to ask for. And per the new NAR proposed settlement agreement, they can't be paid more than their written agreement says. So you might be offering more than what they agreed to take, and you're throwing money away. And I asked my seller, do you understand that? Are you on board? Do you understand all of this? And then there's a protection period. I always tell my seller, I would paraphrase it this way. Look, if I show a property to somebody, or another agent shows a property to somebody while I've got it listed, and then you cancel the listing, and you turn around and you sell it to that person that we introduced to it within, and you'll see there's a blank there. It's the second highlighted paragraph, all compensation, second line, otherwise transferred by seller within blank days. I usually put 365. Now, I'm okay with 180 if a seller presses me, but normally I put 365. I say, look, if I show them this house and then you cancel the listing and you turn around and sell it to them, well, who introduced them to the property? Who sold the house really? I did. This protects us from unscrupulous sellers. That's what I say. I say this is intended to protect us from unscrupulous sellers. Now, if we just don't do our job and you fire us and list with somebody else, then this doesn't apply. You'll see the last sentence there. This provision does not apply in the event the subject property is listed with another broker at time of sale, because you'll have to pay them. This is designed to protect us from unscrupulous sellers who are trying to avoid a commission.
But they may take offense, right?
Well, I think when I say unscrupulous sellers, they feel like, oh, well, I'm not in that category, so I don't
Okay.
need to worry about that. So if they start saying, well, I only want to put 30 days there, I'd say, really? Do you plan to turn around and sell this in 30 days to somebody I showed it to? I'd be very concerned about that. I'd be very concerned if I had somebody who wanted me to put less than 120 or 180 days. I'd really be concerned about that. Because there are people that will do that. And what happens, the buyer goes to the seller, knocks on the door and says, why don't you cancel your listing with Bruce, and then I'll buy the house from you direct and you won't have to pay a commission and you can save money. Well, really, it's the buyer that's trying to save money. They're going to lower their offer by the amount of my commission. The seller's going to end up with the same net with no representation. So it's in nobody's interest. And then it says that the settlement attorney will collect it at settlement. They're irrevocably authorized and directly collect our fee at the settlement table. And I typically will ask the seller as I'm going through this. I don't spend as much time as I'm spending with you, but normally for me to go through the listing agreement, it's going to take 45 minutes to an hour at least. And I'm going to paraphrase it. You can do a couple things. It applies to all documents you do. You can either hand them the entire document and say, go read it. Nobody does that. What I do is I go through it and I paraphrase it, or I summarize each term to make sure they understand what it says and what they're agreeing to. Then when I'm done, I will review So in other words, we agreed we're going to list it for 325 for 1 year, but you cancel with 30 days notice after 120. And I'll just hit a few of the highlights and they'll say, yes, that's what we agreed to. I'd say, okay, now, would you like to read the agreement word for word before you sign it? I'm happy if you want to do that. And they'll say, no, I don't have any interest in doing that. And they'll sign it. But I offer that opportunity to every client I ever worked with. I'd say, do you want to read it word for word? That's your right and privilege. I'm not trying to rush you or twist your arm or take it that right away from you. And I've never had anybody say they want to read it word for word because I'm thorough in it when I explain it and go through it. And so people say, oh, let's go back to the office and write up an offer real quick. I say, no, we write up an offer, or let's go to the house and list that. I want to list my house for sale. Okay. You got an hour and a half, 2 hours. It's going to take some time because we got to go through this document. We got to get pictures. We got to, get keys. We got to talk about marketing and all that kind of stuff. So this is not something that you just, we're getting paid a lot of money. It's because it doesn't take 5 minutes. It takes a little bit of time to do this. Yes.
Do you, will you like like fill out some of the blanks?
You could. Normally, if I'm at the house and we're going to list it at the house, I'll go through and write it in as I'm going through it. But normally what I'll do is I'll go to the house and they say they want to list it. I may have some of it already filled in.
Okay.
So like I'll have my commission rate filled in.
Okay.
I'll have my 30 days notice after 180. I'll have that all pre-filled.
Okay.
And usually the only thing I haven't filled in is the listing price because they have to decide that. And if they want to change something, I can always change it. But normally if I've filled it in, they don't question it or change it.
Okay.
So yes, I do typically.
And then you just go through each section like you.
I go through each section. Don't read it word for word, but summarize each section and then give them the chance to read it if they want to.
Thank you.
And I'll always summarize it at the end too to make sure they understand. I do the same thing with offers to purchase. Do the same thing with leases. I don't want anybody saying I didn't understand that. Now, seller concessions. Mr. and Mrs. Seller, remember I told you that the buyer might ask you to pay for their buyer's agent's compensation. It's possible that maybe they'll need some help with financing. Maybe they'll need some points paid or something like that. I'm not asking you to agree to that right now, but I'm asking you to be open to at least consider those type of things. And by checking yes here, you're expanding your pool of potential buyers. You're saying that you're indicating a willingness to consider concessions. You're not committing yourself to any amount or any concessions at all. You're willing to entertain offers. Bring me the offer. Let me see it. And so I recommend that you check the yes box here. All right, now I'm going to exit. I'm going to go to my next screen and I'm going to present it. Dennis, can you see section 12?
Yes, sir.
All right. We got a workaround. Authority to cooperate with other brokers. A is a given. There is no yes, no box on A. A says that you'll cooperate with buyer's agents. That doesn't mean we're going to compensate them, but we'll work with them. We'll let them show our properties and we'll work with them. B would be sub-agents. Half the people in the industry have never been a sub-agent and don't even know what we're talking about it because since the presumption of agency, when we got our agency statute, we haven't had sub-agency. I can't remember the last time we had sub-agency scenario. A sub-agent would be, let's say a seller hired Lingo as the listing agent. Lingo then said, we're going to hire Coldwell Banker Premier as a sub-agent, like a subcontractor working for us, which means they're representing the seller. And they're a sub-agent in that case, or like a subcontractor for Lingo.
So you're all working for the seller.
All working for the seller in that case. If we're a sub-agent, we're all working for the seller. And the seller here is going to check yes or no if they authorize that. Some agents always check no, some always check yes. I typically check yes, because if a buyer says they don't want representation, what's that agent that's working with the buyer going to be? Well, they can be a nobody's agent. Or they could be a sub-agent of the seller if the seller's authorized it and agreed to it. The reason that a seller may not agree to it, a lot of people are concerned about vicarious liability, but that's where you're responsible for the actions of another party. But the statute, our new agency statute, says that agents aren't vicariously liable for other agents anymore, except the broker.
Broker is always.
The broker remains liable. So the broker may say, I don't want you checking yes or check no. But I usually check yes, just in case that scenario were to happen. You know, I don't care who they work for. I represent my client. I'll make sure they're well protected. I don't have liability for that sub-agent. Now, as a broker, you might. And so some agents will check yes, some will check no. I'm not going to tell you there's a right or wrong there. Talk to your manager in your particular office and see what they would recommend.
That's good.
All right, now 13, it's an exclusive right to sell. I said you can't list it with anybody else. I'm an exclusive agent. You want to make sure if anybody comes to you and knocks on your door or anything, refer them to me. In fact, what I typically do at this point, I usually take a stack of my business cards with me. And I'll say, if anybody comes to the door and asks, there's another section here in the fine print that says you'll refer all inquiries to me. I'll say, if anybody comes and knocks on the door and asks, hey, I want to see your house, I always say, don't let them see your house. If they're an agent and they've got questions, give them my card. Tell them to call me because you can't work with another agent. If it is a buyer or somebody, tell them you'll call me and I'll come out and meet them. Give them my card, tell them to call me. They say, oh, well, I'm on my way back to Washington, D.C. I'm in a hurry. I really don't have time. Well, you don't know who those people are. They might be planning on coming in there and burglarizing your house. You don't just allow anybody to come into your home. In today's world, you can't do that. When I bring a buyer, they've usually been pre-qualified. I've screened them first. Usually I've got their license plate or some ID. I know a little bit about them. They've signed a contract or a document with me. So you've got a little more safety, if you would, when an agent's involved. I always tell a seller, here's a stack of my cards. If anybody knocks on your door, just hand them one of my cards. Tell them to call me. They say they're too busy. Say, well, I'll call Bruce. He'll come right out. If I'm tied up, we got 100 and some agents. We'll send one. We'll get somebody right there. Stay put. They're on their way. Okay. And I tell the seller, you can't list your house with anybody else during term. This is an exclusive listing. And I talk about the disbursements of deposits. When we accept a deposit, or if the selling office accepts a deposit, whoever, as long as it's a real estate brokerage organization, they accept a deposit. They've got to put the funds in the escrow account within 72 hours of the contract being ratified, exclusive of weekends and federal holidays. And we can only release it under one of these conditions. The preferred condition is settlement. We take it to the settlement table and apply it towards the purchase price. But if the sale falls through, maybe the home inspection goes bad or the people don't get their loan, the sale falls through, we get a mutual release, then we return it like the release would indicate. Or if we get into a big fight, an argument, and one side sues the other side, then I have to hold it until the court tells me who's supposed to get it. Or I can file an interpleader. I can give it to the courts and say, court, you decide. I don't want to hold this money anymore. You decide. But that costs money. And if I do that, the parties are going to have to pay for that. Or I can use a passage of time process. So if we get into a dispute and we can't get a signed mutual release, then it says in the fine print here, if you drop down where it's underlined, escrows, broker's notice, and disbursement process based on passage of time. Seller agrees that if there is a dispute over the entitlement to deposit monies that is unresolved blank days and the default is 60, I'm fine with the default. In Newcastle County, some agents have used 7 days. I think that's rather quick. It used to be 180. That would prove to be a little bit long. So I think 60 is a good default. You can leave it blank or you can write 60 in there if you want 60. What it says is after 60 days, after the proposed settlement date, if it doesn't settle or it falls apart and it's been 60 days since and we still haven't got a mutual release, you're still fighting, then what I'm going to do, I'm going to send a notice to all parties. I'm going to say, look, based on what I can see in the contract, it appears to me this side should get the deposit. If I do not hear from either of you that you've started arbitration, litigation, or mediation within the next 60 days, then I'm going to disperse it to decide that I think should get it. Now, please understand, that doesn't mean that that takes away your rights. Decide it doesn't get it, can still go to court, can still seek the money. I just want to get it off my books. It's not my problem. It's you two that are fighting over it. So to get it off my books, I'll give it to the person after I've notified you, giving you 60 days to get litigation, mediation, or arbitration. If you do nothing, then I'm going to send it to the person I think should get it. That does not take your rights away. And you indemnify me and hold me harmless if I do that. You will be properly notified. It's all spelled out here. If somebody other than a brokerage organization licensed in Delaware, a real estate brokerage, posts a deposit, such as a settlement attorney, the parties are advised to talk to legal counsel because that can get tricky. All right, I'm going to go to my next screen. Dennis, do you see section 15?
Yep.
Okay. Seller warrants the information in the agreement's true. And I go through this pretty quickly with the seller. I say, everything you've told me is true to the best of your knowledge. You're going to hold me harmless. If you say the roof was put on 3 years ago, and I say the roof was put on 3 years ago, and it looks like the roof was put on 3 years ago, so that it doesn't look like it was put on 40 years ago. I can't say, well, Bruce, you were negligent. You told me something, it appeared reasonable. I presented that to the buyer. I'd never tell the buyer it was put on 3 years ago. I'd say the seller says it was put on 3 years ago. Come to find out, it was put on 40 years ago, and they want to sue me. You're going to hold me harmless because you misrepresented it. You're telling me that everything you've told me is true, and I can use it as a basis to convey that to the property and market the property.
But we should still, though, as agents, do due diligence, correct?
Yes. Now, if they said it's only 3 years old and you put in your remarks, roof is 3 years old, but you can tell as a real estate agent, you can tell it's 40 years old. You can't say, oh, well, the seller said 3 years. No, that you are supposed to be able as a real estate professional to discern that that's a lie, that that's not true.
And also, like the searches of the property, you'll see sometimes in the, in details, they'll talk about when they did an improvement.
Yeah, so generally speaking, you can rely upon what your seller says is being accurate unless there's a red flag to the contrary.
Okay.
And if there's a red flag to the contrary that someone with your level of expertise as a real estate professional should know, then you could still be held liable.
Okay.
Like the seller says the basement's never leaked. I say the basement's never leaked, but yet there's a water stain 4 feet up the wall, a horizontal stain all the way around the basement. Well, what is it? You're a real estate agent. You got to know what that's a red flag. There's been a flood sometime. Number C, you'll conduct all negotiations through me. That's when I give them my cards. That's that fine print I told you that was in here. You understand that you're responsible for taking care of the property, keeping the grass cut, keeping the insurance and all that. Not me during the time it's for sale. And that you have read the CIS, the Consumer Information Statement, that form I gave you. So I very quickly go through that. It says that at settlement, you'll convey good title. You'll give a deed of special warranty, which is the standard type of deed that we have in Delaware. Or if say it's on Lewis Beach, I'll say you'll do an assignment of lease. If it's a mobile home, you're selling the mobile home, you'll do a bill of sale, and you'll do maybe a assignment of lease for the mobile home site, or else maybe they'll enter into a new lease. There's two options there. That's per the law. That's in the addendum. Seller agrees to execute any agreement at settlement. You'll sign the deed at settlement or the lease, assignment of lease. And then I'll go on to the next page. And I'll say, you agree to provide me with all reasonable documents that I need to try to assist me in selling the property. For instance, if I need utility bills, you'll give me that. You'll give me the tax records and that kind of. I say, but listen, folks, most of this I already have because it's public information. It's on the internet. I already know what your taxes are. If you paid them, I know what you're assessed for. I know all that stuff. But if I need something else to help me, you'll provide that. Such as, and here's a good example, a current well or septic inspection. When we sell your home, if it's on a septic tank, you're going to have it inspected. If you've had an inspection in the last 36 months, you need to provide that to me because they're good for 36 months. I talk about all taxes and special charges like rent monies, condo fees, homeowners association, whatever is applicable here. They'll be prorated as of the day of settlement. You'll pay them as the seller till settlement. The buyer will pay them from that day forward. If you prepaid them, they'll reimburse you for their portion that you're entitled to. You'll give me access to the house. You'll allow me to put a lockbox on it. You'll understand that you can't hold me liable if somebody breaks in because of the lockbox. It's probably easier for them to break in the house than it is to break in the lockbox. They don't need to get in the lockbox to get in the house. But you'll allow me to put a lockbox, and then I'll explain our lockbox system. It's very good. It's central lock. It requires a mobile app and a PIN. If somebody loses their membership as a realtor or is disciplined and loses their rights, they're turned off. They can no longer access your property. It records it. It tells me who went in and when they went in. It's a really neat system. It says that you warrant that you've disclosed all defects in the seller's disclosure. You're not aware of any problems with the house that you haven't disclosed in the seller's disclosure or the radon disclosure or the lead-based paint disclosure forms that we've given to you or are going to give to you shortly. You understand that the sale may be subject to financing, which are, if it is, it may require an appraiser to get in. You'll make sure the house is open for them. It may be a home inspection in the agreement of sale. If there is, you'll make sure that the home, they can gain access and that the utilities are on at time of inspection. And you understand if you're not a Delaware citizen, I'm on I. If you're an out-of-state citizen, then what happens, you'll have to pay a tax if you owe an income tax on this sale. You'll have to pay it at settlement as opposed to later on when you would normally do your annual tax return. That's so you don't leave the state and forget to file a tax return. It's not an extra tax or new tax. It doesn't cost you any more than a Delaware resident. It's if they want it now instead of later when you do your tax return. And that's when I normally I'll tell them if you're married, filing jointly, if you occupy the home as your primary residence for at least 2 of the preceding 5 years, up to $500,000 of gain is excluded from tax. Delaware recognizes the same rules and guidelines that the IRS does. If you're single, it's $250. Married, filing jointly, it's $500. And I'll usually know if the seller's an out-of-state citizen, if they're not a Delaware resident. Out-of-state resident. And if so, I'll explain that. If they're not, I'll just go over it quickly. If they are out of state and there's going to be a big gain, I'll say, look, I don't know what your basis on this house is. Maybe it's 500,000. We're selling it for 2 million. You're going to have a big gain here. If you've not used it as your primary home for 2 of the last 5, you're going to have to pay tax perhaps on all that. You need to talk to your accountant or financial advisor, and I'll give you the form so you can start working on that ahead of time. Because if you don't calculate it at the settlement table, then the state's going to take a default amount, which is probably more than you would owe. They'll refund any excess that they take when you file your tax return, but nobody wants to pay them ahead of time. Yes.
So if they use it as a beach home, a vacation home, but it's not their primary residence, then
that would not qualify.
They may be subject to
if they had a gain, and if that gain, if they're not a Delaware resident,
right
now they could have been, as I understand it, they could have been a Delaware resident 6 months a year for 4 years. That's 2 years in a 5-year period.
Okay.
It doesn't have to be consecutive. As I understand it, it does not have to be consecutive, but it has to be for any 2 years of the immediately preceding 5 years.
Okay.
But if they cannot do that, if there's going to be any taxable gain, then the state's going to want their portion at the settlement table. And you have 2 options. Either go see your accountant and get it figured out so you can calculate it and pay that settlement, or let the state take their default, which I think is 6.8%. And if you paid them too much, you can square up when you do your tax return later. But they're not going to let you get away and not pay.
I was in a training class recently, and the instructor said that they just give this form always automatically, no matter what.
Yeah, I would give
Just
this
include it.
form when I had a listing, if it was applicable, if they weren't a Delaware resident, I'd give it to them then. When I had a sale, I'd make sure they had it then.
Okay.
And then when I'm reviewing payoffs or things like that, for the closing documents, I'd review it then too. Make sure, don't wait to the last minute, because at the last minute, this isn't something you can do in 3 or 4 seconds. Usually, people don't know what the basis of their home is, and they don't know what the gain's going to be, and they'll need some expert to help them calculate that. Like their accountant, attorney, financial advisor, usually accountant perhaps. They'll know what the book value or basis of the property is. Everybody good? Now I'm going to go to the next slide. I know this is review for some of you, but I appreciate you signing on. Seller acknowledgement. I always tell a seller we caution that you put your valuables away. I recommend that you take jewelry and guns. Frankly, I tell sellers, this is what burglars want when they come in your home. They want guns and they want drugs. They don't come steal TVs and stuff to speak of anymore. They want guns and drugs. So I tell them, put all that stuff away. Take it away out of the house or hide it. I'm going to go over with the seller in a minute where we're going to offer the property. We're going to put it on the internet. You realize most sellers think that's wonderful. You're going to put my house, you're going to do a virtual tour. You're going to put all these pictures and wonderful. Well, you realize when I do that, anybody in the world that has internet access can see your house, see how to get in, how the rooms are laid out, where you keep your valuables. You need to think about that. You're exposing your house, the interior of your house, to the whole world with no filters or protections. Now, I'm not recommending you don't do it. You'll have to do it pretty much, but you need to use some common sense to put your valuables away. Says you'll indemnify me and hold me harmless if somebody gets hurt on the property, or somebody breaks into the lockbox or the house, or those type of things. I'm not responsible for that type of thing, unless I or one of my agents, are involved in it or do it. Seller hereby acknowledges that the listing broker can take interior and exterior photographs, prepare virtual tours, and/or use any other media for the purpose of advertising. I can advertise it any way I see fit. You're authorizing that, provided I'm paying for it. If any advertisement that I'm willing to pay for, you say, Bruce, you're the expert in it, have at it. D, seller authorizes the listing broker to show the property and to put a for sale sign. I can put a for sale sign on the property. When we get an agreement of sale, I can put a sale pending or a sold sign. And then E, I would ask them, do you have any audio visual surveillance system in the property? If you do, we need to check this box, yes, and you will need to post a visible notice at the entrance where buyers will be entering the property. If you don't, then just check no, and that's the end of it. I go on to 18. I'm authorized to accept a deposit and put it in our escrow account until settlement. If the buyer forfeits the deposit, they just don't show up to settlement or don't do something they're supposed to and forfeits their deposit, then our office is entitled to half of it, up to but not to exceed our normal commission amount. And I just keep right on going. If you stop and look at them, it's as if you're expecting them to ask questions. I just keep right on explaining. And when I'm done, I'll ask them if they have any questions. B, all advertising, which may include magazines, newspapers, internet signs, other promotional vehicles, deemed advisable by the listing broker or hereby authorized by the seller, unless specified, should be paid by the listing broker. I'm authorized to submit the property on the multiple listing service. I'll tell them in a second, I'm going to be giving you an MLS addendum that you're going to have to sign.
That's new.
That's the new form as of August 14th that Bright requires. I'm now on D. And there's no right or wrong on D. A, B, C, D. It's D, sub A, B, C, D. Seller authorizes the listing property be displayed on the internet. Most every seller is going to put yes. Now, B is, can we put the address? Can we put the actual numerical number, the street address? Normally I say yes. Some sellers may say, oh, no, it's vacant. I don't want anybody to know exactly. They can know it's for sale, but I don't want them to know the street address. They can probably find it. In fact, there's apps now where you can walk around, just walk down the street and you take a picture of the house and it'll tell you who owns it and if it's for sale and all that stuff. So C, seller authorizes a AVM, automated valuation method of system where if you go on realtor.com or Zillow, they'll have these estimates and the computer will tell you the amount that they think the home is probably worth. But that's based on statistical data for that zip code or area. It's not, sometimes it's accurate, sometimes it's not at all accurate. But if you don't authorize that, then it won't be displayed on these internet sites. And authorizes blogging features associated with the property where somebody can look at your house today, go home, blog on their website. Maybe it's a virtual office. This was for virtual offices. They go on their website and they say, we showed this house to a client today and it's a dump. Stay away from it. Look, here's one way. Here's how I explain this to the sellers. The internet is like taking confetti and throwing it in the wind. That's what you're doing. We're trying to attract as many people as we can, but we're throwing confetti in the air. Now go try to gather all the pieces up. You will never get them all picked up or cleaned up. That's just a risk you take in today's world. So I see most agents check yes, yes, no, no, or yes, 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 yes. It doesn't matter as long as you check the MLS the same way. In today's world, you probably just check yes, 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 I guess. Because their sites are going to give automatic valuations regardless of what you check. A lot of these sites, you've got RPR, you know, they give estimates, Zillow, all of them do. They all give estimates now. I'm authorized to put together a fact sheet and to market the property. I'm authorized to receive offers, bring them to you, assist you in preparing counter offers. I'll answer your questions. I'll help you in marketing and give you advice. I want to talk about G, Mr. and Mrs. Seller. There is a chance that we may get multiple offers. If we get multiple offers, do you want me to disclose that fact to the agents involved, or you want me to keep that undisclosed? You don't have to disclose that. Now, generally, if you disclose that there's multiple offers, that'll create a sense of urgency, like a competition, like a bidding war, and that'll be in your best interest. However, it's totally possible that, and I've had this actually happen, where somebody says, oh, you've got other offers, I'm not going to present an offer. And the first thing you know, everybody pulls their offer because they don't want to get in a bidding war, and now you have no offers. That could happen. I've seen it happen. So it's up to you whether you want to disclose that information. If somebody asks me if there's multiple offers, how do you want me to answer that? A says that you authorize me to tell them, yes, there's multiple offers, not the amount, not the terms, just there's other offers. B, no, I'm not authorized. If they said you have other offers, I'd say I'm not authorized to answer that question. C, we'll talk about it if and when it happens. Normally, I use A or C. I tend to like C because no matter what we talk about today, a month from now, when we get multiple offers, the seller's not going to remember it. So I tend to put C. We'll talk about it if and when it comes up. I'll let you know, and you can tell me how you want to handle it. But there's nothing wrong with putting A as well. Very seldom do you see somebody say no, but that is a seller's right, B, if they choose. 19 is fair housing. You'll see we won't discriminate based on any of the protected classes. Then we go to 20. Now, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, sometimes when you get an offer on your home, the buyer will put what we call a love letter with it. It's a supplemental letter that will tell you, oh, we love your home. We hope you sell to us because we've got a handicapped child and ramp in the back, and the backyard is perfect for our handicapped child. And what I'm telling you here in section 20, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, is we can't discriminate based on any of the protected classes. So if you were to make a decision based on the comments, like I just gave you an example of a handicapped child in the backyard, you say, oh, well, I don't want a handicapped person here. Or, oh, I'd love to see the handicapped person here. And you make a decision based on one of those protected classes, you could be violating the law. So I'm warning you, if you get a supplemental letter, I'll bring it to you. You don't have to look at it. That's up to you. But if you were to look at it, I just caution you, be careful that you don't make a decision based on any of these protected classes. Don't allow that to influence your decision. Now, if it's not a protected class, I had one once where the buyer said, we love your house because it's got a train room, and my father had a train room in his house and left the trains to me, and it will be perfect. We'll put the trains up, my father's trains up in there. Well, that sounds nice, and we actually got the house in that scenario, but that's not a protected class. 21, this agreement's binding on your heirs, executives, assignees, successors, etc. I don't know if that's legally enforceable, but it's in the document, so I pointed it out to you. Number 22, here's the addendums that we've attached. The seller's disclosure, the lead-based paint, radon, the Kiowa, that's Delaware Uniform Common Interest Ownership Act, Delaware Consumer Information Statement, or CIS, septic report if we got it, anything else. These are all attachments. Now, what I'm going to do, if everybody online here agrees, I didn't do this last time, a couple months ago when we were doing the listing agreement. I just went through the listing agreement. But I think our next class, before we move on, listing agreement, you'll have an advertisement, you'll have pictures, you'll have a key, you'll have maybe a lockbox serial number, you'll have a seller's disclosure, a lead-based paint, and I'll go over each one of these forms that you need to have, because if you don't, Ellen's going to send it back to you and say, hey, this doesn't meet the test. You don't have everything you need. So I'm going to do our next class before we move on to buyer agency form will be that.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
I haven't read into this yet, but under a list of lien holders, so they had a mortgage still at home.
Uh-huh.
Is that would that be applicable? Like,
Yes.
An example?
And there is a standard DAR form which has a list of lien holders.
Oh, it does? Okay.
First mortgage, second mortgage, third mortgage. And a lot of times people will have a home equity or line of credit on their house. That's recorded as a mortgage, even though you may have a zero balance on it. Whatever you're authorized to borrow, that full amount is a mortgage on your property if you were to check do a title search. So you got to get those things cleared up or released to convey clear title.
But that's what we would have.
That it's called a list of lien holders, and we do have a form for that. It's a standard one-page addendum.
Okay.
I think that's the
DAR
title of
form?
it. It's a DAR form. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Okay. And then we're going to go to something that's new. 24 is new. 23 is not. I always in 23, I tell the seller, hey, we can offer a home warranty if you want. You don't have to. The buyer can get it on their own if they want. They can get it and pay for it. But you can offer it. It, in theory, is supposed to make your house more attractive. And it does provide some protection for you, too. If somebody buys your house and something breaks, rather than them trying to say, well, you knew about it, you didn't tell me, and coming after you, they just call the insurance company, the warranty company, and they'll send somebody out to fix it. So if you'd like to offer a warranty, I can explain them to you. We offer them in-house. We have different companies in-house. We use American Home Shield. We use the 210 product. I am told, I don't know if it's public information yet, but I'm told that 210 is now being acquired by American Home Shield, which I'm glad to hear because I like American Home Shield very much. And I like their representative, Tony Kinch. He's real good to work with.
That's good.
Yeah, so if you want to include one, I'm just making you aware of it, but it's not included unless you say you want it included.
Now, if they already have one on their home,
If they have one, I would find out if it's transferable, if
You
it
would,
covers the
okay.
buyer, and I'd get that information.
okay.
Yes. Yeah, it may or may not be transferable, so I would check on that. And see when it expires, because they're probably not going to give you a whole year. It'll probably give you the rest of the term. Number 24, this is a yes or no. Do you want to be bound to arbitration? This language is in our listing agreement, and it's in our buyer agency agreement between the brokerage and our client. If we get into a dispute, if you check yes, that means you and I are waiving our legal rights, and we're both agreeing to be bound by binding arbitration. If you leave it blank or check no, that means we're not bound to arbitration and we retain our legal rights. And there's no right or wrong on that. In fact, I know some companies are telling their agents check no because the company doesn't want to give up their legal rights. But the reason it's in there is because of the proposed NAR settlement. Legal counsel for NAR told all the state's attorneys in their meetings, their nationwide meetings, that they recommended this to avoid a class action lawsuit such as they have currently going on. Number 25, additional terms. Here's where I could put anything else. Now, if I wanted to say that the lawnmower was included, the riding lawnmower, I could have done it back in the included items, or I could have done it here. I'll give you an example of something you might put here. One of the sellers is a licensed Delaware real estate broker. That will fit there very easily, and it satisfies your requirement to disclose that. You don't have a whole bunch of room there to go typing up books or novels, but you got room to type a couple sentences. Remember, a lot of the things you may want to put there, like must sell addendums and things like that, or tax deferred exchange addendums, or those, we have standard addendums for that. So you wouldn't put that under additional terms. This would be for something short, like one of the sellers is a licensed Delaware real estate broker.
So you put the other under addendums, 22, right? You're supposed to, right? Like the 1031
The
exchange.
1031 exchange, yes. If I were doing a 1031 tax deferred exchange, I would probably put that up under the section that we did a little bit ago that said addendums.
Right.
I'd check other, and I put 1031 tax deferred exchange addendum. Yeah. If we've got an addendum, there's no need to write it or try to draft it, use the addendum. But this is for things that we don't have addendums for that are
Okay.
short and sweet.
Okay.
And then we've got, this is the entire agreement. It can only be modified if it's put in writing, signed by all the parties. You understand it, you've read it, you understand it. And in 28, you are the owner. You have the authority to sell this. It doesn't require anybody else's signature or authority. And you are signing here as having the authority to execute this agreement. And you understand down the bottom where it's in yellow, it says this agreement is binding when signed by all parties, including the listing broker or their authorized representative. So you need to ask your broker or your manager, do they want you signing it or they want it coming back? I know most of the time in Rehoboth, they would bring it back, turn it into Ellen. And then when I was the broker, if it had everything it was supposed to have, she'd stamp it with my signature and date it. But that you can check with your office. I know on buyer representations agreements, typically the agent will be authorized to sign it, but on listing agreements, the broker or manager may want to be the one signing it, accepting it. So that you need to know. The broker can sign it, or they can authorize an agent or someone else to sign it on their behalf. It becomes binding once it's signed by all the parties, even though maybe on the MLS document, it says we won't publicly make the property available for the world to know about it until next Tuesday. Maybe we sign this document today. It's binding today, but I cannot tell anybody that it's for sale or market it until next Tuesday per my MLS Bright addendum that says I can publicly tell the world it's available on this date. And the reason for that is it gives me from now until next Tuesday to get my pictures, my drone photography, and do any repairs and all that kind of stuff. But it is signed, so the seller can't change their mind. And I go out and spend money on photos and drone photography and Matterport and all that. And then the seller say, oh, I don't want to sell it anymore before the broker signs it. So that's why that was done. As opposed to what they used to do, the broker wouldn't sign it until you had everything together, all the pictures and all, and then they'd sign it because once they sign it, you had 2 days to have it in the system. Well, now they say you're protected. It's binding when it's signed. It can be, the public can know about it on a date on the Bright MLS addendum, and you're protected in that interim while you're getting pictures and all.
But not considered ratified until your broker has signed.
Depending if the broker authorizes somebody else to sign
I
it.
see, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
The seller has signed it, and the broker or the broker's authorized agent or representative, aside whoever that may be. Now, I don't know currently, for instance, in Rehoboth, if Ellen is stamping them with Steve's signature, or if Steve's signing them, or if perhaps they're letting the agent sign it, or if Becky's signing it, or who. I haven't taken the listing in a little bit, but you'll want to check with your manager on that, which documents you're authorized to sign.
I think she's signing still. I mean,
All right, so those are that is the listing agreement. Hey, now I can see faces. I hope everybody wasn't bored to death because I couldn't see your faces, and I know this is a little bit monotonous, but especially for those of you that have been doing it for a while. But does anybody have any questions on the listing agreement? That's the listing here. That's a DAR form. It's recommended listing agreement. It's the form that we use as a company. It is exclusive. It is in dot loop. At our next meeting, which would normally be in 2 weeks, we will go over all the attachments or addendums that go with this, like the CIS, the Kiowa listing addendum, all that stuff, and everything that you need to have in your listing package. But in 2 weeks, we have postponed that meeting because in 2 weeks from now, we're going to have the Moxie website training. And everybody will want to be at that because you'll walk away with a personalized website for free as part of the Caldwell Banker system. So we will forego our class in 2 weeks, and I'll let you know it'll be in November that we'll get together again. Any questions? Everybody's muted, so if you have a question, you'll need to unmute yourself. If there are no questions, then I will thank everybody and say have a great day. See you later.
Thank you.
Thank you.